piece of sad news in light of Toys R Us also passing away in a lot of ways. Charles Lazarus, the founder of Toys R Us, who founded Toys R Us 70 years ago, passed away this past Thursday. He was 94 years old, which
Wow.
is,
That's
wasn't
really good.
it wasn't sudden, but it wasn't something that was like, oh wow, But it's kind of sad that his baby passes away, and then he passes away not long after that. Um, Charles Lazarus was a pioneer. Uh, his creation of Toys R Us pretty much came about that after World War II. He started noticing there was the huge baby boomer thing that was going to be starting, and a lot of people were going to be having children and stuff like that. And in 1948, he anticipated that whole explosion of it, and he started,
That baby boom.
yeah, that baby
Ah,
boom.
get it?
Yeah, there you go. Um, he pretty much started up a baby supply and toy store, which officially wasn't called Toys R Us at the time, but as time progressed, he later on renamed it that. And again, the whole point of the R being backwards on it was just because it would be like a child, as if they wrote the title. And he was a bit of a futurist. He was really good at. There was a lot of really interesting interviews that I saw where he's being interviewed, and his logic when it came to picking toys for the store and stuff. Like he would say a lot of times when he would get baby toys, he'd actually go down onto the ground on his hands and knees just to feel the perspective of the child when they're on the floor playing with the toys. He was a very eccentric individual, and one of the things too that I give him a lot of credit for was after the video game crash of 1983. They interviewed him, and he felt pretty firmly that video games were going to be the future, and that his exact quote, "cartridge gaming is going to be the number one product." Like he knew that video games were going to be replacing toys, and he saw it. And this was like during the Atari Intellivision era. He wasn't even addressing like when the Nintendo explosion happened in like '85 and '86. So he really saw stuff ahead of
Ahead of the
everyone else.
curve, basically.
Yeah, and it's pretty impressive. Um, it's again, this guy, he kind of stopped being CEO around the mid '90s, and then passed it on to Michael Goldstein, who would succeed him. And then he would just stick around and still till literally, there was an interview that said until literally about 3 weeks ago before he passed, he was still visiting key locations just to check out stuff and see how everything's going, and see people and see what the hottest product is and give his 2 cents and everything. So it was a passion for him. He was a big fan of toys, a big fan of children, and it's a shame, that in a poetic way that he passed away very shortly after the decline and end of his creation.
Hmm.
But again, 94 years old, so that's a full life, as I always say. You know,
He did it all. He
he did
pretty
it
much
all.
did it all.
He did it all, and he seemed like he was a very smart guy. Try to find online. There's a lot of different interviews that people did with him. In light of him passing away, now a lot of these interviews are starting to surface, and he seems like he's a really smart spoken individual. He has a very interesting take when it comes to toys and the evolution of toys from the 60s into the 70s into the 80s with the video game boom. Really cool guy. And the last thing I just want to say is his last name, Lazarus. Oh, God. Um, that's a heavy. Anyone who's a religious Christian, I'm not, but I know of it.
Or
Uh,
into Batman too.
oh, yeah, I think yeah, Batman also, and I think
Yeah,
Lazarus
the
was also
Lazarus Pit.
it was also a name used in the Dreamwave Transformer comics. Was the name of a character, and
Yeah.
reflects rebirth.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe Toys R
Even
Us closed.
before David Bowie passed, he had a song on his last album, Black Star, called Lazarus.
There you go. So Lazarus implies that there's a death and then there's a rebirth. So who knows? Maybe this isn't the end. But yeah, pretty cool dude. Try to check out some of his interviews because there's, again, really interesting